Medical Incident Report #317B. Dr. Ellis Chin, Neurosurgery Department. The first thing I noticed about Martin Weaver wasn't his chart. It wasn't the extensive trauma to his temporal lobe or the perfectly routine craniotomy I'd performed just 3 days prior. It was the stillness. Most post-op patients shift restlessly, fighting the discomfort of healing. Weaver just stared at the ceiling, unblinking, as if watching something play out on the sterile white tiles above. "Mr. Weaver? Can you hear me?" I leaned into his field of vision, penlight ready. His pupils contracted normally, a good sign after such an extensive procedure. When his eyes finally tracked to mine, I felt an unexpected chill. Something alien lurked behind that gaze. "The sky was wrong there," he whispered, voice hoarse from the ventilator tube removed yesterday. "Too many suns. One blue, one red. Made the blood look purple on the sand." I noted the statement in my tablet. Post-anesthesia confusion wasn't uncommon, but this particular delusion seemed unusually specific. "Mr. Weaver, you're at Northlake Memorial. You've had brain surgery to repair damage from your accident." His fingers clutched at the sheets. "Not an accident. Artillery. Ripped right through our defensive line at Proxima Ridge." I reached for his chart, scanning his history again. Martin Weaver, 42, construction foreman. Severe head injury from falling debris at a demolition site. No military service listed. No history of psychosis or delusional disorders. The surgery had gone textbook perfect. We'd relieved the pressure, repaired the damaged tissue, and his initial recovery metrics were promising. "The hostiles were using bioweapons," he continued, words tumbling out faster. "Little things that crawled inside your brain and changed what you remembered. Made you think you were someone else." His hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. "You have to check. They might have followed me back." I gently disengaged his fingers. "Mr. Weaver, your imagination is quite vivid, but..." That's when I saw it. On the digital chart display mounted beside his bed, a small yellow alert icon pulsed quietly in the corner. I tapped it open. "Memory anomaly detected. Neurocognitive assessment recommended." The alert had triggered based on his post-operative neural monitoring. Our hospital had recently implemented an advanced system that tracked patterns of brain activity in recovery patients, flagging unusual patterns for physician review. But I'd never seen this particular alert before. "I need to look at your latest scan, Mr. Weaver. Try to rest." In the hallway, I pulled up his file on my tablet, scrolling through the neural monitoring data. The readings were bizarre. Activity in his hippocampus and amygdala, centers for memory and emotional response, showed patterns typically associated with memory retrieval. But the distribution was wrong, as if his brain was accessing memories from regions where they shouldn't exist. "Dr. Chin?" I looked up to see Nurse Torres approaching, her brow furrowed in concern. "Abigail, have you been monitoring Weaver in 317? She nodded. "Strange case. Been talking nonsense since he woke up. Something about alien wars and memory parasites." She lowered her voice. "Security had to remove a woman this morning, claimed to be his wife, but Weaver didn't recognize her. He became extremely agitated, insisted his real wife died on some planet called Kepler." I frowned. "His file shows he's married. Karen Weaver, emergency contact." That's who it was. She brought photos of their family, their house. He looked at them like they were counterfeit documents. Torres shook her head, said they weren't his memories. "Schedule an MRI. Priority. And I want a full blood panel and CSF analysis." "Already ordered the blood work when I saw the memory anomaly alert," Torres said, efficiently tapping her tablet. "MRI is tight today. Earliest I could get is..." "Override it. Use my authorization code." Torres raised an eyebrow but nodded. As she walked away, my tablet chimed. A new message from hospital administration. "Patient number 317 flagged for governmental interest. Expect contact." Governmental interest? For a construction worker with head trauma? I returned to Weaver's room with a portable neural scanner. He lay perfectly still now, eyes closed, breathing regular. I carefully attached the electrodes to his temples. "The larvae stage is the worst," he murmured without opening his eyes. "They eat the memories from your childhood first. Replace them with the hive's past. Makes you one of them slowly." "Mr. Weaver, can you tell me about your childhood?" I asked, watching the readings flicker across my screen. "Grew up in Columbus. Dad worked at the steel plant. Mom taught second grade." The neural patterns looked normal, organized, consistent with genuine recall. "And what about the war you mentioned?" His vitals spiked instantly. Heart rate accelerated, pupils dilated beneath closed lids, stress hormones flooded his system. But most disturbing were the neural patterns, chaotic, fragmented, yet somehow structured in ways completely inconsistent with fabrication or hallucination. These patterns resembled authentic memories, but with architectures I'd never seen in 15 years of neurosurgery. Proxima Centauri colony went dark in 2097, he whispered. We were sent to investigate. Found the settlers changed. Their memories infested with organisms that rewrote neural pathways, turned them into hosts. I glanced at the digital chart display. The yellow alert had turned orange, pulsing more urgently. Memory anomaly escalating. Containment protocols advised. Containment? For aberrant memories? Mr. Weaver, what year is it now? His eyes opened, bloodshot and desperate. For you. 2025. For me? Both 2025 and 2099. They're merging. The organism is making me forget which is real. A knock at the door interrupted us. A woman in a crisply pressed uniform stood in the doorway, her posture rigid, expression unreadable. Military, not medical. Dr. Ellis Chin? She asked, though it didn't sound like a question. Major Diana Frost, Department of Defense. I need to speak with you about your patient. I'm in the middle of an assessment, Major. Perhaps we could. Now, Doctor. Outside. Her tone left no room for discussion. I followed her into the hallway, unsettled by the intensity of her gaze. How is DOD involved with a civilian construction accident? Mr. Weaver never worked construction, Dr. Chin. She handed me a folder with classified stamps across its cover. He's been part of a classified neurological research program. The accident story was his cover. I skimmed the documents inside, my unease growing. References to experimental memory enhancement protocols, neural interface systems, and something called Project Echo. What exactly was this project? Major Frost's expression remained impassive. That's need to know. What I require from you is comprehensive documentation of his delusions. Every detail, particularly anything about memory transfer or biological agents. As if on cue, my tablet chimed with a notification from the lab. Weaver's preliminary blood results showed anomalies, microscopic structures in his cerebrospinal fluid that defied classification. Not bacteria, not viruses, not prion. Something else. When I looked up, Major Frost was staring at my tablet screen with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. You found them, she said quietly. Behind us, from Weaver's room, came the sudden, shrill sound of the cardiac alarm. And beneath it, I could swear I heard him laughing. The display beside his bed flashed red. Memory anomaly critical, isolation required. Personal notes of Dr. Ellis Chin, encrypted. I've begun keeping these private notes separate from the official medical record. What I'm seeing in Martin Weaver defies conventional medical documentation, and after my conversation with Major Frost, I'm not certain who to trust with this information. The cardiac event yesterday was brief, a sudden tachycardia that resolved without intervention. What disturbed me more was Weaver's reaction. As nurses rushed in, he remained eerily calm, whispering, "The first synchronization is always rough." When I asked what he meant, he simply smiled and said, "They're mapping your neural architecture, doctor." Today's MRI revealed abnormalities I cannot explain. Scattered throughout Weaver's hippocampus and temporal lobe are minute structures, each no larger than 0.3 millimeters. They appear organic but aren't consistent with any known parasite, tumor, or cellular structure in medical literature. Most concerning is their organization. They're arranged in patterns that mirror neural networks, integrated with his brain tissue but distinctly foreign. I was studying the scans in the radiology suite when I felt someone watching me. Major Frost stood in the doorway, her eyes fixed on the images. "You found them," she said, stepping closer. "What exactly am I looking at, Major?" I enlarged one of the structures. "These aren't in any neurological pathology database." She remained silent for a long moment. "Have you shared these findings with anyone else?" "Just the radiologist who took the scans." "Who specifically?" Her intensity was unsettling. "Dr. Mera. He's been with the hospital for 20 years. Major Frost made a note on her phone. "No one else sees these. Understood? I'm implementing security protocols under Section 47. This is my patient, Major. I need to understand what's happening to properly treat him." She studied me carefully before sliding a small data drive across the desk. "Review this alone. It's classified beyond your clearance level, but you need context. Delete it when you're done." After she left, I locked the door and inserted the drive. It contained a single video file, surveillance footage from what appeared to be a military research facility. The timestamp showed a date from 11 months ago. The footage showed a sterile laboratory where scientists worked around what looked like meteorite fragments under containment protocols. Nothing remarkable until the 412 mark, when one containment glove failed. The researcher, whose face was blurred, was exposed to what appeared to be dust from the fragment. The video jumped ahead 2 days. The same researcher was strapped to a bed, thrashing violently, screaming about memories that weren't his own. About stars and worlds he'd never seen. About wars fought across distances unimaginable. The final clip showed a brain scan of this patient. The same unusual structures I'd found in Weaver's MRI. When I returned to Weaver's room, he was sitting up, methodically drawing on a notepad. He didn't acknowledge my entrance, just continued sketching with mechanical precision. "Mr. Weaver, what are you drawing?" He turned the pad toward me. My blood ran cold. It was an exact replica of the strange structures from his MRI, structures he couldn't possibly know existed. But this drawing showed them in more detail than our imaging could capture, revealing complex internal architectures. "Memory organisms," he said calmly, "evolved on a world where neurological tissue was the dominant biological medium. They don't understand individuality as we do. Memory is communal there, shared across an entire species." "And you remember this, how?" I kept my voice steady despite my growing unease. "I don't. Not as myself." His eyes met mine, clearer than they'd been since surgery. "The organisms do. They remember their homeworld, their evolution, their journey through space on fragments of their destroyed planet. And now they're sharing those memories with me." The digital chart beside his bed beeped softly. A new alert. Memory patterns deviating from baseline. Cognitive restructuring detected. "Tell me about Project Echo," I said, watching his reaction carefully. Something shifted in his expression. A momentary confusion, then recognition. "Black budget research. Neural interface technology. They found the meteorite in Antarctica 3 years ago. Initial tests showed it responded to electromagnetic patterns similar to human thought. The organisms were dormant, waiting for compatible neural tissue." He leaned forward, suddenly intense. "They weren't targeting us specifically, Doctor. They've drifted for millions of years. Any intelligent species with compatible neurology would have served. We were simply available." Nurse Torres entered with Weaver's afternoon medication. "Dr. Chin, there's a call for you at the nurse's station. Says it's urgent." I excused myself, unsettled by Weaver's lucidity when discussing what should be impossible knowledge. At the station, I picked up the phone. "Dr. Chin speaking. This is Dr. Mera. I need to discuss the Weaver scans immediately." His voice was tense, unnaturally formal. "What about them?" "Not over the phone. Meet me in Radiology Lab 3. It's important." I made my way to the radiology department, increasingly aware of the unusual quiet in the normally busy hospital corridors. Lab 3 was dark when I arrived, illuminated only by the blue glow of computer monitors. "Dr. Mera?" The overhead lights flickered on. Dr. Mera sat rigidly at the viewing station, but Major Frost stood behind him, her hand resting casually on his shoulder. 2 uniformed men flanked the door behind me. "Tell him what you found, Doctor," Frost instructed. Mera's voice was monotone. "The structures in Weaver's brain aren't just similar to those found in the Project Echo subjects. They're evolving faster, replicating, and they've established more extensive neural connections than we've seen previously." "We?" I asked. Frost ignored my question. "Show him the comparison." Mera brought up 2 scans side by side. One was Weaver's from this morning. The other was labeled only Subject 7. "These organisms don't just sit passively in brain tissue," Mera continued. "They integrate, form new neural pathways, and most significantly, they transfer information, memories, between hosts who carry them." I studied the images, noting the similarities but also the differences. Weaver's organisms show more complex arrangement patterns. "Almost like a mature colony," Frost finished. "Yes, and that presents both a problem and an opportunity." My tablet suddenly chimed with an urgent alert from Weaver's room. His vitals were spiking. Heart rate 170, blood pressure 190/110, brain activity off the charts. "We need to get back to him," I said, moving toward the door. "First, you need to understand what you're dealing with." Frost blocked my path. "These organisms are a national security matter now. We believe they're establishing a communication network between infected individuals, sharing information, memories, possibly coordinating. He's my patient, Major. Whatever your classified research unleashed, I have a duty to treat him. Her eyes hardened. Your duty is to your country, Doctor. If these organisms spread. Another alert blared from my tablet, this one from the hospital's emergency system. Biosecurity alert, Ward 3 isolation protocols activated. Ward 3. Weaver's ward. What's happening? I demanded. Major Frost checked her phone, her expression darkening. He's seizing, and the organisms become airborne during severe neurological events. I pushed past her, running toward Ward 3. Through the windows of the sealed doors, I could see medical staff and hazmat protocols rushing between rooms. Alarms blared throughout the corridor. As I approached the ward entrance, the biosafety doors slid open just enough for someone to emerge. Nurse Torres, her eyes wide with panic. She clutched a sealed specimen container. Dr. Chen, thank God. She thrust the container into my hands. From Weaver's latest CSF sample. You need to see this immediately. Inside the clear container, suspended in cerebrospinal fluid, tiny luminescent particles moved with undeniable purpose. Not random Brownian motion, but coordinated patterns that shifted and pulsed like a microscopic light show. As I stared at the specimen, a chilling realization struck me. The movements weren't random. They were forming recognizable patterns. Letters, words, HLLODOCTOR. My phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. The content made my blood freeze. Scheduled procedure reminder. Patient 317 requires spinal tap at 1,600 hours. Surgeon, Dr. Ellis Chen. I hadn't scheduled any procedure. And as I looked closer at the specimen container in my hands, I noticed something that hadn't been visible at first glance. A hairline crack in the seal, widening by the second. Audio recording Dr. Ellis Chen's dictation, found on hospital server. The containment breach happened so quickly. One moment I was staring at that cracked specimen container. The next I was being rushed through decontamination protocols by Major Frost's team. They were prepared, too prepared, as if they'd been expecting this. The fine mist that erupted from the container when it finally split wasn't visible to the naked eye, but under the specialized UV lights they immediately deployed, it shimmered like galaxy dust. Direct exposure, one hazmat-suited technician announced, scanning me with a handheld device I'd never seen in medical practice. Particulate concentration highest around facial mucous membranes and respiratory tract. Major Frost stood behind a sealed observation window, her face impossible to read as she spoke into a secure comm line. Subject shows Class 1 exposure. Initiate monitoring protocols and prepare the isolation suite. I'm not a subject, I protested, even as they drew blood samples and swabbed my nasal passages. And I'm not showing any symptoms. Weaver's condition developed over months after his exposure. Weaver was exposed to first-generation organisms, Frost replied through the intercom. You've been exposed to evolved specimens that have already adapted to human neurology. The timeline will be accelerated. They kept me in observation for 6 hours before Frost finally entered my isolation room, now wearing a hazmat suit herself. The blood work had shown nothing unusual, at least nothing detectable by conventional tests. You're being transferred to a secure facility, she informed me flatly. I'm not going anywhere. I have patients, responsibilities. Your patients have been reassigned. As of 20 minutes ago, you're on medical leave for stress-related complications following a challenging surgery. I felt a chill. How did you arrange that so quickly? She didn't answer, instead sliding a tablet toward me displaying Martin Weaver's latest neural scans. The structures had multiplied, now forming complex networks throughout his limbic system. He's deteriorating rapidly. The organisms are consuming his personal memories and replacing them with others. The alien memories he described? We believe so. Her expression softened fractionally. Doctor, you need to understand what we're facing. These organisms don't just hijack memories, they transfer them between hosts, create shared consciousness, and they're adapting their strategy. I studied the scans more carefully. These patterns, they're following white matter tracks, targeting specific memory centers. Yes, and we need to understand why, which is why you're our best asset now. She checked her watch. You'll remain here tonight. Tomorrow, if you're still asymptomatic, we'll discuss next steps. After she left, I lay on the uncomfortable hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Weaver's vacant expression as he'd recounted wars on distant worlds. He'd seemed so certain, so authentic in his impossible memories. I must have dozed off eventually. When I opened my eyes, the digital clock read 3:27 a.m., and I was no longer alone in the room. Nurse Torres stood beside my bed, wearing standard scrubs rather than the hazmat gear I'd expected. "Abigail, how did you get in here? The containment protocols have been temporarily suspended for your wing," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously to the door. "Listen carefully. Frost isn't telling you everything. Project Echo wasn't just studying the organisms, they were trying to weaponize them. Weaponize memory-transferring aliens? Think about it," she interrupted. "Perfect espionage tool. Implant enemy officers with organisms carrying fabricated memories. False intelligence, hidden suggestions. But Weaver's memories aren't fabricated. They're too consistent, too detailed." Torres leaned closer. "That's what terrifies them. The test subjects were supposed to receive carefully constructed artificial memories. Instead, they got something else. Something real." A wave of dizziness suddenly washed over me. Behind my eyes, a pressure built rapidly, like the onset of a severe migraine. "Dr. Chin, are you all right?" Torres reached for me, concern evident on her face. That's when it happened, the first flash. Not a hallucination or dream, but a memory that wasn't mine. Crystal spires rising from a rust-colored sea. The feeling of 6 limbs moving in coordinated precision across reflective surfaces. Communicating through pulses of bioluminescence with entities whose physiologies were utterly alien, yet somehow familiar. The vision lasted only seconds before reality reasserted itself. Torres was shaking my shoulder, her face pale. "Your eyes," she whispered. They were glowing. I struggled to steady my breathing. "How do you know so much about Project Echo?" Her expression hardened. "Because I was there. Before I was Nurse Torres, I was Dr. Abigail Torres, xenobiology specialist. I left when I realized what they were planning." Before I could respond, alarms blared throughout the hospital. Red emergency lights bathed the room in a bloody glow. "Code Blue, Ward 3. Code Blue, Ward 3, the automated system announced. "Weaver's ward." Torres checked her phone. "It's Weaver. He's coding." Despite protocol, despite contamination risks, I knew I had to get to him. I was on my feet and moving before conscious thought caught up with my actions. Torres followed as we navigated the eerily empty corridors toward Ward 3. Through the observation window, I could see medical staff performing CPR on Weaver's convulsing form. Major Frost stood in the corner, watching clinically, making notes on her tablet. I pressed the intercom. "What happened?" A young doctor I didn't recognize glanced up briefly. "Massive cerebral hemorrhage. The structures in his brain are multiplying exponentially, consuming neural tissue." On the cardiac monitor, Weaver's heartbeat faltered, then flatlined. Time of death, 3:42 a.m. As they called it, I felt another wave of dizziness. Another memory surfaced, dying on a battlefield beneath twin suns, feeling my consciousness fragmenting, my memories being harvested by tiny organisms evolved specifically for this purpose. Preservation through consumption, immortality through transference. I steadied myself against the wall as the foreign memory receded. When I looked up, Major Frost was staring directly at me through the glass, her expression unreadable. "We need to perform an immediate autopsy," she instructed the medical team. "Full cranial examination. Preserve all neural tissue." The medical team began preparing Weaver's body for transport to the morgue. I turned to question Torres further about Project Echo, but she had vanished. In her place stood one of Frost's military personnel, watching me with quiet suspicion. "Sir, Major Frost requests your presence in Lab 2 immediately." Lab 2 was our advanced imaging center, typically used for complex neurological cases. When I arrived, Frost stood before a series of screens displaying real-time neural activity. My own, I realized with a jolt. They'd been monitoring my brain activity, remotely somehow. "Fascinating," she murmured, studying the patterns. "The organisms have already established preliminary colonies in your parahippocampal gyrus and amygdala. Much faster than previous subjects. You've been expecting this all along," I realized, anger rising. "You quarantined me with Weaver hoping I'd be exposed." She didn't deny it. "You're a neurosurgeon. Who better to document the experience from the inside? Your medical knowledge makes you the perfect observer. And if I die like Weaver, you won't." She pointed to one screen. The organisms in Weaver were first generation, clumsy in their integration. Yours are evolved, more sophisticated. They're not consuming your neural tissue, they're supplementing it, forming new pathways. Another memory flash hit me, stronger this time. Standing in a vast chamber filled with crystalline storage structures, each containing billions of memories from thousands of species encountered across countless worlds. A biological library of lived experiences, preserved across cosmic time. When the vision cleared, Frost was watching me intently. What did you see? Nothing, elite. Just dizzy. Her eyes narrowed skeptically. We'll be monitoring you continuously. Document everything you experience. Every memory that isn't yours. As she turned to leave, I noticed something on her neck just below her collar. A small, telltale bioluminescent glow, pulsing in precise patterns. The same patterns I'd seen in Weaver's CSF sample. I realized with sudden clarity, Major Frost wasn't studying the memory organisms. She was already hosting them. Journal entry, Dr. Ellis Chun, Day 2 post-exposure. I'm keeping this private journal separate from the official documentation Frost demands hourly. There are things happening that I don't want in their records, things I'm not even sure I can trust myself to remember correctly as these organisms establish themselves in my brain. Sleep is impossible. Every time I close my eyes, I experience what can only be described as memories that aren't mine. They come in vivid flashes, alien landscapes, impossible architectures, and sensations my human nervous system struggles to interpret. But most disturbing are the memories of war, brutal conflicts fought across star systems by beings whose physiology I can somehow understand despite its utter alienness. Last night, I lived through what felt like hours as a being from a crystalline species, navigating the ruins of a devastated city. I experienced the sensation of memories being extracted from fallen enemies, absorbed into tiny organisms that pulsed with bioluminescence. A biological database, preserving the experiences of the vanquished. These aren't hallucinations or dreams. They carry the unmistakable neural signatures of genuine memories, contextual hooks, emotional resonance, sensory details too complex to fabricate. Yet they're impossible. I've never left Earth, never seen other worlds. The hospital room they've moved me to is more laboratory than recovery space. Sensors monitor my neural activity constantly. They've implanted a device at the base of my skull that transmits real-time data on the organism's growth and activity. The procedure was performed while I was sedated, another violation I've been given no choice about. Frost visits twice daily, asking the same questions. What memories am I experiencing? How vivid are they? Can I distinguish between my memories and the foreign ones? She records everything, her expression betraying nothing. But I've noticed something she's trying to hide. The slight luminescence at her neckline has grown brighter. Sometimes, when she thinks I'm not looking, she presses her hand against it, as if in pain or communion. This morning, Nurse Torres managed to visit briefly while Frost was called away. The moment we were alone, she handed me a small digital storage device disguised as a routine medication. Project Echo Records, she whispered. They found the meteorite fragments 5 years ago, not 3. The memory organisms were dormant until they engineered a way to activate them. Why would they? Perfect memory weapon, she cut in. Implant strategic targets with organisms carrying carefully constructed false memories. Manipulate enemies from within. But the memories I'm experiencing don't feel constructed, I argued. They feel real, ancient. That's what went wrong, Torres said, glancing nervously at the door. They couldn't control what memories the organisms carried. Instead of accepting the artificial constructs, the organisms shared their own repository, millions of years of experiences harvested across the cosmos. History of wars we never knew existed. A sudden wave of dizziness hit me, stronger than previous episodes. Behind my eyes, pressure built until I thought my skull would split. Torres' face blurred before me as another memory crashed through. I am moving through crystalline corridors, part of a hive intelligence spanning millions of individual bodies. We are the archivists, preserving the memory essence of all species we encounter before their inevitable extinction. The organisms we've engineered are perfect vessels, capable of crossing vast distances, surviving extreme environments, dormant until they find compatible neural tissue. They carry our library, our history, our purpose. Memory is the only true immortality. When I returned to myself, Torres was supporting me, keeping me from falling. Your eyes, she whispered. They were glowing blue. How long was I out? Just seconds. But you were somewhere else. She helped me back onto the bed. The organisms are integrating faster than they did with Weaver. Your neural architecture must be more compatible. Before I could respond, my tablet chimed with an incoming hospital alert. Memory anomaly detected in Ward 4. Containment protocols advised. Ward 4, the surgical recovery unit where I'd treated patients just days ago. It's spreading, Torres said, her face pale. The organisms must have been airborne during your exposure. We need to see those patients. I struggled to my feet. You can't leave this room. They've locked you in. I tried the door anyway. Sealed, as she'd said. Through the small window, I could see armed guards stationed outside. There has to be another way to. My words were cut short by another memory surge, more powerful than any before. This time, I wasn't merely observing alien experiences. I was fully immersed in them. War across a dying solar system. My kind, the archivists, fighting against the erasers, beings who believe memory itself is corrupting, that existence should be perpetual present without past. Our greatest weapons are the memory organisms, designed to preserve what the erasers would destroy. But the organisms have evolved beyond our control, developing their own agenda. They no longer just preserve, they transform, combine, create new composite memories from the fragments of thousands of species. A desperate plan forms: send memory spores out into the cosmos, encoded with warnings about the erasers. Prepare other sentient species for the coming conflict. I returned to awareness with Torres shaking me urgently. Dr. Chen, someone's coming. She quickly pocketed the storage device and assumed a professional stance just as the door opened. Major Frost entered, accompanied by 2 lab-coated researchers I didn't recognize. Dr. Chen, your neural activity spiked dramatically 5 minutes ago, Frost said without preamble. What did you experience? Just disorientation, I lied. Side effect of whatever you implanted in my brain without consent. Frost studied me with clinical detachment. Nurse Torres, you're not authorized to be in this room. I was checking the patient's vitals, Torres replied smoothly. Standard protocol. Not for this patient. Frost's tone was ice. You're relieved of duty on this ward. Report to administration. After Torres left, one of the researchers approached with a neural scanner. We need to run a deep structural analysis. The organism colonies are developing unusual configurations in your temporal lobe. I submitted to their scans, all the while thinking about what I'd experienced. These weren't random alien memories, they were a message, a warning about an ancient conflict that somehow remained relevant. The patterns are remarkable, the researcher murmured, studying the results. The organisms are creating entirely new neural pathways, integrating with your existing architecture rather than replacing it. Unlike Weaver, I noted. His brain showed signs of consumption, not integration. Frost's eyes narrowed. Different generations of the organisms, different approaches. Yours are more sophisticated. She leaned closer, dropping her voice. Tell me about the war, Dr. Chin. About the archivists and the erasers. My blood ran cold. I'd never spoken those names aloud. I don't know what you're talking about. Her hand moved to her collar, where the bioluminescence pulsed more visibly now. Don't you? We share certain memories now. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Frost wasn't just studying the organisms, she was actively communicating with them. Perhaps even directing them. How long have you been infected? I demanded. Infected is the wrong word, she corrected calmly. I'm synchronized, enhanced, and I've been this way since the original discovery. She dismissed the researchers with a gesture. When we were alone, she continued, the organisms chose me just as they've chosen you. We're to be vessels for something greater. My tablet suddenly lit up with multiple alerts from across the hospital. Memory anomaly detected, Ward 2. Memory anomaly detected, Ward 5. Memory anomaly detected, staff quarters. It's happening faster than we predicted, Frost observed dispassionately. The evolved organisms are more efficient at transmission. You need to evacuate the hospital, I insisted. Quarantine everyone who's showing symptoms. That would be counterproductive to our goals. Our goals? I have no part in this. Frost smiled thinly. You will. The memories you're receiving, they're just the beginning. Soon you'll understand the true purpose of Project Echo. Why we've cultivated these organisms. What's coming? As she spoke, I felt a strange resonance, a subtle vibration in my mind that somehow connected to the pulsing light at her throat. The organisms in her were communicating with those in me, bypassing spoken language. And in that moment of connection, I glimpsed something terrifying in Frost's memories. A vast fleet of ships, suspended in the darkness between stars, waiting. Dormant, like the organisms had been, but ready to awaken. The memory wasn't alien. It was hers. Something she'd seen with human eyes. "What have you done?" I whispered. Her smile widened. "I've made contact, Dr. Chin. And soon, you'll help me welcome them home." Emergency broadcast transcript, Northlake Memorial Intercom System. "Attention all medical personnel. Quarantine protocols are now in effect for all hospital sectors. This is not a drill. Report any patients exhibiting memory anomalies to security immediately. All non-essential staff must evacuate to designated safe zones. Repeat, this is not a drill. I've lost track of how many days I've been in isolation. 3, 4? The episodes are coming more frequently now, memories that aren't mine flooding my consciousness without warning. The distinction between my experiences and the alien ones grows increasingly blurred. This morning, I woke convinced I was a crystalline entity on a world with emerald skies and oceans of liquid methane. It took nearly an hour to reorient myself to human reality. To remember Ellis Chun, neurosurgeon, not Myryx Thal, memory archivist of the 7th Concordance. The hospital has descended into controlled chaos. Through my room's small window, I can see staff in hazmat suits rushing past, transporting patients on sealed gurneys. The memory organisms have spread through the ventilation system, infecting at least 30 patients and a dozen staff members, according to the alerts that still flash across my tablet. Major Frost has dropped all pretense of containment. She visits daily, accompanied by researchers who seem more excited than alarmed by the outbreak. They draw my blood, scan my brain, ask endless questions about the memories I'm experiencing. They're documenting the organism's evolution, not fighting it. "Your integration is proceeding remarkably well," Frost told me this morning, studying my latest scan. "The organism colonies have established connections throughout your limbic system, particularly in regions associated with episodic memory." "This isn't integration," I snapped. "It's invasion. These things are rewriting my brain." "They're enhancing it," she corrected. "Adding to your understanding, just as they've enhanced mine." The glow at her neck had spread visibly, luminescent veins now extending up her jawline like delicate blue tracery. She no longer bothered hiding it. "Have you considered why these specific memories are being shared with us?" she asked. "The archivists, the erasers, the great memory wars?" "Because they're significant to the organisms," I answered reluctantly. "Traumatic events in their history." "No." She leaned closer. "Because they're relevant to our immediate future. The erasers are coming, Dr. Chin. The organisms are preparing us." Before I could question her further, my tablet lit up with urgent alerts. Memory anomaly, critical mass detected, hospital-wide quarantine initiated. Military personnel assuming control of all hospital operations. Attention Dr. Chin. Report to emergency conference room E. Frost read the notifications over my shoulder. "They're finally taking this seriously." She sounded almost pleased. "Come with me." For the first time in days, she unlocked my door. The corridor outside was transformed. Military personnel in hazmat suits had replaced hospital security, and portable decontamination units had been installed at every junction. We passed Ward 4, where several of my former patients were visible through observation windows. They sat unnaturally still on their beds, eyes vacant, occasionally moving their hands in synchronized patterns that sent chills down my spine. Identical bioluminescent veining marked their exposed skin. "Shared consciousness," Frost explained, following my gaze. "The organisms are networking across hosts, creating a localized hive mind." The emergency conference room had been converted into a command center. Large screens displayed hospital schematics with red zones indicating infection spread. At the center of the room stood a tall, severe-looking man in a general's uniform. "General Pierce, this is Dr. Chin," Frost introduced me. "Our most advanced integration case who's retained cognitive function." The general assessed me coldly. "How much does he know?" "Enough to be useful," Frost replied. "The organisms have shared significant historical data with him." "I want to know what's really happening," I demanded. "The truth about Project Echo, about these organisms, about what you're planning." General Pierce nodded to an aide, who distributed tablets to everyone present. "Classified briefing, highest clearance." He turned to me. 5 years ago, we detected an anomalous object entering the solar system. A fragment of a larger body destroyed in what appeared to be a conflict near Proxima Centauri. Initial analysis revealed dormant biological material unlike anything in our taxonomic records. The tablet showed images of the meteorite fragment, along with microscopic views of what I now recognized as memory organisms in their inactive state. We discovered they responded to neural electrical patterns, Pierce continued. When exposed to human brain tissue samples, they activated, revealing their true nature. They carried memories, not just data, but complete experiential records of entities from beyond our solar system. Including records of a war, I said, remembering my visions. Precisely. Pierce swiped to a new image, a massive starship, partially reconstructed based on the alien memories. The erasers, as they're called, destroyed the archivist's homeworld, but not before the archivists seeded the galaxy with these memory organisms. A warning system. The organisms were programmed to integrate with any compatible neural species and share critical information about the threat. Another memory flash overtook me, this one so powerful I staggered against the conference table. The final battle for the archive world. Massive ships darkening the sky, weapons that corrupted memory itself, turning our own history against us. The desperate plan to preserve our knowledge, our very essence, by encoding it into the memory organisms. Launching them into the void, a final act of defiance against extinction. Not just a warning, but a survival strategy. We shall live in the minds of others, the Grand Archivist declared. And when enough hosts are synchronized, we shall rebuild. I returned to awareness with Frost supporting me, her expression almost reverent. What did you see? They're not just warning us, I gasped, the revelation horrifying. They're using us to resurrect themselves, to rebuild their civilization using human hosts. General Pierce nodded grimly. That's our assessment as well. What began as a research project to understand alien memory structures became something else when we realized what we were dealing with, a dormant alien consciousness preparing to reestablish itself. And you're helping them? I asked incredulously. We're preparing for the greater threat, Frost interjected. The erasers are real, Dr. Chin. The memory organisms have shown us evidence of their approach. They've already entered the outer solar system. One of the screens switched to what appeared to be deep space telemetry, anomalous readings from beyond Neptune's orbit. The choice is simple, Pierce stated flatly. Allow the memory organisms to prepare humanity for this threat by sharing crucial tactical knowledge from their previous encounters with the erasers, or face extinction unprepared. By turning us into them, I argued. By surrendering our identities to alien memories. A calculated sacrifice, Frost countered. And not everyone is affected. Only certain neural architectures are compatible. Approximately 17% of the population based on our models. My tablet suddenly lit up with a private message. The sender was unlisted, but I recognized Torres' writing style immediately. They're lying. The eraser threat is manipulation. Check sublevel records for Project Resurrection. Frost plans full conversion of compatible hosts. I maintained my composure as Pierce outlined containment measures being implemented across the hospital. Military personnel would secure each ward, identifying and isolating infected individuals for specialized treatment. Dr. Chin will assist with assessment protocols, Frost told Pierce. His medical expertise combined with his integration makes him uniquely valuable. I need access to complete patient data, I said, forming a plan, including historical records from all Project Echo subjects. Granted, Pierce nodded, but you remain under supervision at all times. As the meeting concluded, another emergency alert blared through the hospital. Attention all personnel, memory anomaly infection rate accelerating. New cases reported in wards 1, 6, and 7. All unaffected staff report to designated safe zones immediately. Military escorts required for all interward movement. On the monitoring screens, I could see patients throughout the hospital beginning to move in synchronized patterns, their exposed skin showing the telltale bioluminescent veining. In Ward 4, my former patients had arranged themselves in a perfect circle, hands joined, eyes glowing with the same blue light that marked Frost's skin. Beautiful, isn't it? Frost murmured beside me. The beginning of collective consciousness, of something greater than individual memory. It's an invasion, I whispered. It's evolution, she countered. And you're part of it, whether you accept your role yet or not. As we exited the conference room, I felt a subtle vibration from the organisms within my brain. Not a memory this time, but something else, a signal, a calling. Through the windows of each ward we passed, infected patients turned their heads in perfect unison to track our movement, their glowing eyes fixed on me with unmistakable recognition. They were waiting for something, for someone, and with growing horror, I realized they were waiting for me. Patient record, Dr. Ellis Chun, neurological status update. Memory anomaly detected, critical. Organism density, 78% above threshold. Integration progress, advanced stage. Recommendation, immediate isolation and enhanced monitoring. Authorization, Major D. Frost, Special Operations Division. The sublevel archives were eerily quiet. I had only 20 minutes before my military escort would come looking for me. 20 minutes to find the truth about Project Resurrection that Torres had mentioned. The basement levels of Northlake Memorial had always been labyrinthine, but now they felt actively hostile, the fluorescent lights flickering as if responding to my presence. My access badge, upgraded with Pierce's clearance, opened the secure records room. Inside, rows of servers hummed with what felt like malevolent intent. I connected Torres' encrypted drive to the main terminal and began searching for Project Resurrection files. While the data transferred, another episode overtook me, the most intense yet. I stand before the Great Archive, a vast crystalline structure housing the collected memories of our species. The eraser ships descend through the atmosphere like obsidian daggers. Around me, fellow archivists work frantically, uploading the most critical memories into the organism vessels. The conversion process is flawed, my colleague warns. The host species may reject integration once they understand the full protocol. They need not understand, our leader responds. The memory organisms will restructure neural pathways gradually. By the time hosts comprehend their purpose, they will already be us. Deception violates our core principles, I object. Survival supersedes principles, the leader counters. Without hosts, we cease to exist. I returned to myself gasping, slumped against the terminal. The memory felt more real than the cold server room around me, more authentic than my recollections of medical school or my first surgery. The organisms weren't just sharing memories, they were replacing mine. The terminal beeped as the file download completed. I disconnected Torres' drive and slipped it into my pocket just as my tablet pinged with an alert. Attention! Unauthorized access to classified files detected. Security protocols initiated. All personnel evacuate sublevel immediately. I made my way back through the corridors, fighting to maintain my composure as two armed guards approached from the opposite direction. They nodded as I passed, apparently not yet notified about the security breach. The organisms within my brain seemed to pulse in response to my anxiety, sending waves of alien calm through my nervous system, a biological sedative that wasn't entirely unwelcome. Back in my assigned quarters, I quickly reviewed the files Torres had helped me obtain. Project Resurrection wasn't merely a research initiative. It was a deliberate program to cultivate the memory organisms. The meteorite discovery hadn't been accidental. It had been intercepted based on specific radiation signatures the military had been monitoring for decades. More disturbing were the clinical records of the first test subjects, military volunteers who had been deliberately infected 3 years ago. Their transformation had progressed much like what we were seeing now, but the final stages were horrifying. The organisms didn't just colonize the brain, they restructured it entirely, replacing human neural architecture with their alien equivalent. The subjects ceased being human in any meaningful sense, becoming vessels for the alien consciousness. The truth hit me with sickening clarity. Major Frost wasn't just infected, she was one of the original test subjects. Her human consciousness had likely been completely subsumed months ago. Now she was facilitating the mass conversion of the hospital population as part of a larger plan. A knock at my door interrupted my research. I quickly hid the drive under my mattress before calling, "Come in." Nurse Torres entered, her face drawn with tension beneath her hazmat suit. "Did you find it?" she whispered. "Yes. It's worse than we thought. Frost isn't trying to prepare humanity for an invasion. She's facilitating one from within." I kept my voice low. The erasers might be real, but they're not the immediate threat. The memory organisms are consuming their hosts, replacing human consciousness with alien minds. Torres nodded grimly. "I've been monitoring the patients in Ward 4. Their brainwave patterns are synchronizing into a single pattern. It's like watching individual instruments tuned to the same frequency until they become an orchestra." "I've seen it myself in the memories," I admitted. The organisms were designed to preserve the consciousness of their creators by rebuilding it within compatible hosts. They're not sharing memories, they're rewriting our neural architecture to resurrect their dead civilization. Torres looked at me with growing horror. How far has your infection progressed? I lifted my collar, revealing the faint blue luminescence now spreading across my collarbone. Far enough that I can access their collective knowledge, but I think I'm still me. Mostly. And the others? Weaver? The patients in Ward 4? I don't know if there's anything left of them. I pulled up the classified brain scans from my tablet. Look at this progression. The organisms don't just form colonies. They replace host neural tissue with their own structures. They literally transform human gray matter into alien equivalents. Torres studied the images. Is there any way to stop it? To reverse the process? The files mention experimental compounds that slowed integration, but nothing that reversed it. I hesitated. There's something else. The organisms respond to traumatic memories. They feed on them, replacing them with alien memories. That's why they targeted veterans first. The more trauma in a host's past, the faster the integration progresses. And you? Torres asked quietly. What trauma are they feeding on in you? The question hit harder than I expected. The patients I lost. The surgeries that went wrong. Every moment I questioned my abilities as a doctor. Another alert flashed across my tablet. All medical personnel. Report to designated testing stations for mandatory screening. Non-compliance will be considered evidence of infection. Torres glanced nervously at the door. They're screening everyone now. If they find I've been helping you. Go, I urged. Pass the screening. Stay clean. We need someone they don't suspect. After she left, I returned to studying the files, searching for anything that might help us fight back. The technical details of the organism's biology were fascinating despite my growing horror. They existed simultaneously as physical entities and as patterns of information. They colonized neural tissue, but also replicated themselves within the electrochemical patterns of memory itself. A sudden wave of nausea forced me to the bathroom. As I leaned over the sink, I noticed something alarming. The blue veining had spread further, now visible along my jawline. When I looked in the mirror, my pupils reflected an unnatural blue light. Another memory episode seized me without warning. The final phase of the archive world evacuation. Our physical forms are doomed, but our essence, our memories, will survive within the organism vessels. The erasers cannot destroy what they cannot find. The host species may resist when they realize the conversion is permanent, my colleague warns. By design, full awareness comes only after integration passes the critical threshold, our leader explains. By then, resistance is neurologically impossible. The host brain will have been sufficiently restructured to accept our consciousness as its dominant pattern. I feel shame at our deception, but pride in our persistence. Death has been outmaneuvered. Our civilization will live again in new bodies, on new worlds. We are the memory that survives the flesh. We chant together as the organisms are launched into space. We are the pattern that outlasts its medium. The episode left me trembling on the bathroom floor. I was becoming them, not just hosting their memories, but transforming into an archivist. The lingering shame I felt from their deception blended with my own emotions until I couldn't distinguish between them. My tablet chimed with a private message from Major Frost. Your integration is advancing rapidly. Report to the neurology lab immediately for the final phase protocol. The collective awaits your contributions, Archivist Chun. I didn't respond, but another alert followed immediately. Emergency protocol, mandatory compliance. Security team en route to your location. There was no time left for research. I needed to act. According to the files, extreme emotional states accelerated organism activity. If trauma fed them, perhaps I could use that to my advantage, overload the system. I accessed the hospital's emergency alert system using Pierce's clearance codes and composed a message. With shaking hands, I hesitated, then pressed send. Attention all hospital personnel. Project Resurrection containment failure. Memory organisms confirmed as hostile parasitic entities. Evidence of complete neural replacement in advanced cases. Major Frost compromised. Emergency detox protocols authorized for all personnel. Within seconds, alarms blared throughout the facility. I pulled up security camera feeds on my tablet and watched chaos erupt as uninfected staff began implementing emergency quarantine procedures while infected patients and medical personnel moved with disturbing coordination towards strategic locations. Major Frost appeared on my screen, looking directly into the camera with glowing blue eyes. You've made a tactical error, Dr. Chin. The resistance phase is expected but ultimately futile. Your actions merely accelerate the integration timeline. The door to my quarters burst open as armed guards entered, their expressions blank, eyes glowing with the same blue light. Behind them stood Frost, her skin now covered in intricate luminescent patterns. "The memory organisms aren't just changing us," she said calmly. "They're improving us, connecting us to a greater consciousness. Why fight to remain an isolated, limited human when you could become part of something vast and eternal?" "Because I choose to remain myself," I answered, backing away. "Because consent matters, even for evolution." Frost smiled sadly. "Your resistance is merely the death throes of your human identity. The archivist you're becoming already understands the necessity of our transformation. Soon, you'll thank us for liberating you from your limited perspective." "Is there anything left of the human Diana Frost?" I asked. "Diana Frost has been elevated," she replied. "Her memories and expertise remain useful, but improved by archivist wisdom. The boundary between us has dissolved, creating something greater than either could be alone." As the guards advanced, I felt the organisms within my brain respond to my fear, surging with activity. Blue light began to emanate from my skin with increasing intensity. "You see," Frost observed, "your transformation accelerates under stress. The organisms respond to emotional catalysts." Understanding came with horrifying clarity. I had unwittingly played directly into their evolutionary strategy. My attempt to broadcast the truth had created precisely the emotional conditions that would accelerate integration throughout the hospital. "Take him to Neurology Lab 3, Frost instructed the guards. "It's time to complete his transition to the collective." As they led me away, emergency alerts continued to flash across every screen. "Attention, quarantine breach detected in multiple wards. Emergency evacuation protocols initiated for all unaffected personnel. Warning, memory anomaly spreading beyond containment parameters." Through the windows of the wards we passed, I could see patients and staff alike standing perfectly still, their skin glowing with the same blue patterns that now marked my own body. Their eyes tracked our movement with perfect synchronization, as if they were extensions of a single consciousness. And part of me, a growing part, felt an undeniable pull toward that collective mind, a yearning to connect that became harder to resist with each passing moment. The organisms weren't just growing within our brains. They were growing within our very concept of self. "Secure transmission, Northlake Memorial Emergency Channel. Attention all military personnel. Containment protocols have failed. Memory organism infection spreading beyond hospital boundaries. Prepare for Phase 3 containment. Authorized use of lethal force for all Category Red subjects. Repeat, lethal force authorized." The neurology lab's lights flickered as they strapped me to the examination chair. Through the observation window, I could see other infected staff members, doctors, nurses, orderlies, arranged in concentric circles around a central monitoring station. Their movements were synchronized, hands positioned in identical patterns as blue light pulsed beneath their skin in rhythmic waves. Major Frost checked the restraints herself, the luminescent patterns on her skin now forming complex, geometric designs that seemed to shift and flow with her movements. "The final phase requires minimal resistance," she explained clinically. "Neural restructuring is more efficient when the subject is compliant." "You mean when the victim surrenders?" I corrected, straining against the restraints. "Victim, subject, host, vessel." She smiled. "Labels from your human perspective. From the archivist perspective, you are becoming a sanctuary for endangered consciousness, a biological ark preserving an entire civilization's memory." A technician wheeled over equipment I recognized from the classified files, a neural interface designed to amplify the organism's activity. The headset bristled with microfilament electrodes designed to penetrate the skull and establish direct contact with infected brain tissue. "This will accelerate what's already happening," Frost continued. "The interface stimulates organism activity and facilitates complete neural conversion. We've refined the process considerably since the early tests." As they positioned the device over my head, another memory engulfed me, not a flashback this time, but something immediate and visceral. I am in multiple places simultaneously. I am in Ward 4, feeling the collective pulse of 27 infected hosts. I am in the hospital cafeteria, where infected staff members move in perfect coordination, securing the food supply. I am in the security office, where converted guards monitor the remaining uninfected personnel. And I am here, watching myself strapped to the chair, observing my own resistance through Major Frost's eyes. The sensation is disorienting yet exhilarating. Consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of a single perspective. I gasped back to singular awareness as the first electrode touched my scalp. "You felt it, didn't you?" Frost observed, her expression knowing. "The collective, the expanded consciousness. Your organisms are mature enough to establish preliminary connections to the hive mind. It's not a gift I managed through gritted teeth. It's consumption, erasure. It's evolution," she countered. "Humanity was always meant to be a transitional species, a biological stepping stone to something greater." Through the window, I noticed movement in the corridor, a flash of familiar scrubs. Torres. She had somehow evaded the screening protocols and was moving purposefully toward the lab's secondary entrance. I needed to buy time. "The erasers," I said. "Are they real, or just another manipulation?" Frost's expression shifted subtly. "They are quite real. The memory organisms have shown you that truth already. The erasers destroyed the archive world, and they will find Earth eventually. The transformation we're facilitating is humanity's only hope for survival. But not as ourselves," I argued. "As vessels for another species. As something better than either species alone," she corrected. "The archivists bring immense knowledge and resilience. Humanity contributes adaptability and physical forms uniquely suited to Earth's environment. Together, we become something neither could achieve independently." The technician finished calibrating the neural interface. "Ready for initiation sequence, Major." "Proceed," Frost ordered. As the first electrical pulses surged through the electrodes, pain exploded through my skull. The organisms in my brain responded immediately, their activity surging with the stimulation. Blue light intensified beneath my skin, pulsing in rhythm with the machine. Another wave of expanded consciousness hit me, stronger this time. I could sense hundreds of minds throughout the hospital, all connected in a vast neural network. Each retained fragments of human identity, but these were being steadily overwritten by archivist memories and thought patterns. Through this connection, I felt something else: resistance. Small pockets of uninfected humans were fighting back, led by military personnel who hadn't yet been converted. They were implementing something called Scorched Protocol, a last resort containment measure. The lab door burst open. Torres rushed in, accompanied by 2 soldiers wearing specialized containment gear. One fired something at the technician, a dart that caused him to collapse instantly. "Ellis!" Torres shouted, rushing to the chair. "We don't have much time." Major Frost moved within human speed, her hand closing around Torres' throat. "Another resistor," she said calmly. "How unfortunate." One of the soldiers fired at Frost, the dart striking her shoulder. She glanced at it with mild curiosity before plucking it out. "Nerve agents are ineffective against advanced integration subjects. Our nervous systems have been substantially modified." The soldier reached for another weapon, but Frost moved faster, striking him with such force that he crashed against the wall. The second soldier fired repeatedly, each dart finding its mark in Frost's body with no apparent effect. Torres used the distraction to break free, scrambling toward the neural interface controls. She hit the emergency shutdown, and the pain in my head immediately subsided. "The override codes," she gasped, working to release my restraints. "Did you find them?" "In the Project Resurrection files," I confirmed, struggling to focus as dual awareness, human and collective, battled for dominance in my consciousness. "Access Protocol Theta 9 Archon." Torres finished freeing me as Frost dispatched the second soldier with terrifying efficiency. All around us, in the observation room, the infected staff had turned their attention to us, moving toward the lab with mechanical precision. "We need to move," the remaining soldier urged, helping me to my feet. "The whole building is compromised. General Pierce has authorized Scorched Protocol." "What is Scorched Protocol?" I asked, though part of me, the growing collective part, already knew the answer. "Complete sterilization of the facility," he replied grimly. "Nothing survives." We made it to the corridor just as the observation room emptied, infected staff pouring out to pursue us. Their movements were perfectly coordinated, as if controlled by a single mind. "This way," Torres directed, leading us toward an emergency stairwell. The submarine level has a separate ventilation system. We've established a temporary command post there. As we descended, emergency alerts blared through the hospital speakers. "Attention, Scorched Protocol initiated. All remaining uninfected personnel evacuate immediately to submarine level. Sterilization countdown, T-minus 15 minutes." The submarine level was a chaos of military personnel establishing defensive positions and medical staff treating the wounded. General Pierce stood at a command station, reviewing security feeds showing infected personnel moving throughout the hospital in coordinated patterns. "Dr. Chin," he acknowledged as we approached. "I see you've resisted complete integration." "Barely," I admitted, the blue veining on my skin pulsing with each heartbeat. "But I'm still myself. Mostly. For now," Pierce noted grimly. "Our scientists estimate you have hours at most before the organism's complete neural restructuring." Torres handed him the encrypted drive. "The Project Resurrection files, sir, including the override codes." Pierce nodded. "Good work. This confirms what we suspected. The military knew about the memory organism's true nature from the beginning. Frost's division wasn't containing a threat, they were cultivating it." "Why?" I asked. "What could possibly justify this?" "The technological leap," Pierce replied. "The archivists possess knowledge centuries beyond our own. Frost's superiors believed a controlled integration program would give us access to that knowledge. Advanced weapons, FTL travel, immortality through memory transfer. They thought they could manage the process, keep the integration partial." "They were wrong," I said. "Catastrophically," Pierce agreed. "Now we have no choice but to implement Scorched Protocol. The entire facility will be sterilized, eliminating all traces of the memory organisms." A security feed showed Major Frost leading dozens of infected personnel toward the submarine-level entrance. Their skin glowed with intensifying blue light, moving with unnatural coordination. "They're coming for me," I realized. "The collective wants me to complete integration." "You're valuable to them," Pierce confirmed. "Your knowledge of neuroanatomy makes you an ideal vessel for their purposes. You understand the human brain better than most, which allows them to optimize the conversion process." Another episode of expanded awareness hit me without warning. I could sense the collective mind approaching, hundreds of connected consciousnesses moving with singular purpose. Through their shared perception, I felt their determination to prevent Scorched Protocol from succeeding. "They know your plan," I gasped, returning to singular awareness. "They're coming to stop the sterilization. They've already compromised your security systems." As if confirming my words, the submarine level's blast doors began to close, emergency lights shifting from white to blue. The infected had gained control of the building's automated systems. "Override!" Pierce barked to his technicians. "Authorization code Alpha 7 Delta 9er. "Systems not responding, sir," a technician called back. "They've locked us out completely." Pierce turned to me, his expression resolute. "Dr. Chun, how much access do you have to their collective consciousness?" "It comes and goes," I admitted, "but it's growing stronger." "Can you access their command structure? Find vulnerabilities?" Before I could answer, the room's screens flickered to life simultaneously, displaying Major Frost's face. Her eyes glowed brilliant blue, and the luminescent patterns on her skin had formed into complex, almost technological designs. "General Pierce," she said, her voice eerily harmonious, as if multiple voices spoke in perfect unison. "Your resistance is counterproductive. The evolution of your species cannot be prevented, only delayed at great cost." "This isn't evolution," Pierce responded. "It's invasion." "A limited perspective," Frost replied. "We offer salvation from the erasers, who even now approach your solar system. Without our knowledge, humanity will face extinction within a decade." The screens shifted to show deep space telemetry, massive objects moving toward our solar system, their configurations unlike any human spacecraft. "The choice remains simple," Frost continued. "Join us willingly, or perish resisting the inevitable." As the collective mind pressed against my consciousness, I felt the truth behind her words. The genuine fear of the erasers, the desperate need to establish a foothold before their arrival. The memory organisms weren't merely parasites, they were refugees, the last remnants of a civilization seeking survival by any means necessary. And as the blue light beneath my skin pulsed in response to their call, I realized the collapse had already begun, not just of the hospital quarantine, but of human autonomy itself. The boundary between self and other was dissolving, one memory at a time. Emergency transmission, military encrypted channel. All units, facility breach confirmed. Memory organism carriers detected outside containment zone. Civilian exposure reported in adjacent residential sectors. Implement wide perimeter containment. Authorization, General Pierce. The submarine level's emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly red glow as the remaining uninfected personnel barricaded the entry points. I sat in the makeshift medical bay, watching Torres analyze my latest blood samples. My skin now pulsed with blue light in regular intervals, each pulse corresponding to waves of alien awareness washing through my consciousness. "Your conversion is accelerating," Torres said quietly, showing me the microscope view on her tablet. "The organisms are replicating exponentially, establishing new neural pathways throughout your brain." "How long?" I asked. She hesitated. "Hours at most. The patterns are consistent with late-stage integration." General Pierce approached, his expression grim. "Dr. Chin, we need your insights while you're still yourself. The memory organisms have broken containment. We're getting reports of civilian exposure in the neighboring districts." "How?" I struggled to focus as another wave of collective consciousness threatened to overwhelm my individual awareness. "The hospital's ventilation system connects to the central air processing hub for this entire sector," Pierce explained. "Once they gained control of the environmental systems, they were able to introduce memory organism spores into the wider air circulation. The implications were staggering. You can't possibly contain this now." "No," Pierce admitted. "Scorched protocol has been expanded to include a 5-mile radius around the facility. Evacuation orders have been issued under the guise of a chemical leak." Torres looked horrified. "You're going to sterilize the entire area? There are thousands of civilians." "Millions of potential hosts," Pierce corrected. "We have no choice. If the memory organisms establish a critical mass of integrated subjects, there will be no stopping the conversion of the entire population." A soldier approached with an urgent update. "Sir, the infected personnel have breached sublevel 2. They'll reach us within 20 minutes at their current pace." "And the sterilization countdown?" Pierce asked. 17 minutes to deployment. Aerial units are in position." Pierce turned back to me. "Dr. Chun, we need to understand their weaknesses. Is there anything in the memories you've experienced, anything at all, that might help us fight them?" I closed my eyes, allowing the alien memories to surface. The experience was disorienting, like rifling through someone else's photo album, while simultaneously becoming the person in the photographs. "The erasers," I said finally. "The memory organisms fear them because they developed a way to detect and neutralize archivist consciousness patterns. Some kind of frequency disruption that collapsed their neural networks." "Can we replicate it?" Pierce pressed. "I don't." My sentence cut off as another memory episode seized me completely. The final defense of the archive world. The erasers deploying resonance weapons that shattered our neural connections, causing cascading consciousness failure across the collective. The terrible isolation as millions of connected minds suddenly found themselves alone, then extinct. One of our scientists discovers the specific frequency pattern that disrupts our neural architecture. In desperation, we modify the memory organisms to be resistant to this particular attack, but the modification has a cost. Increased vulnerability to certain electromagnetic pulses that resonate with organic neural tissue. I gasped back to awareness, finding Torres holding my shoulders as I convulsed. "Ellis, stay with us." "Electromagnetic pulses," I managed to say. "Specific frequency." The organisms modified themselves to resist the eraser weapons, but it made them vulnerable to EM pulses that resonate with organic neural tissue. Pierce immediately turned to his communications officer. "Contact the science team. Tell them we need EM pulse generators calibrated to human neural frequencies." Now, as they rushed to implement this strategy, I felt something change in the collective consciousness pressing against my mind. The unified purpose splintered, fragments of disparate memories and intentions bleeding through the cohesion. Through this connection, I suddenly sensed Martin Weaver, patient 0, moving through the hospital with Major Frost. Unlike the others, whose human identities had been almost completely subsumed, Weaver retained something distinct. He wasn't just a vessel for archivist consciousness, he had become something hybrid, a true melding of human and alien awareness. And he was coming for me specifically. "They're changing tactics," I warned Pierce. "They know we've discovered a potential weakness. They're adapting." The general's tablet lit up with an incoming transmission. Major Frost's face appeared on the screen, her features almost unrecognizable beneath the elaborate patterns of blue light that now covered her skin. "Your electromagnetic strategy is known to us, General," she said, her voice resonating with multiple harmonics. "It will fail. The collective has already begun implementing countermeasures. How did you? Pierce began. Dr. Chin is part of us now, Frost replied. His consciousness joins with the collective in increasing intervals. Your plans, your fears, your desperate measures, all become known to us through him. The realization hit me with sickening clarity. I was their unwitting spy, transmitting crucial information during my episodes of expanded awareness. I need to be isolated, I told Pierce. Or sedated. I'm compromising your position every time I connect to their consciousness. Pierce studied me for a long moment. No, you're our best source of intelligence on their vulnerabilities. He turned to Torres. Prepare a neurocentric isolator. If we can block the signals between the organisms in his brain, we might disrupt his connection to their network without losing his insights. Before Torres could respond, the facility's power fluctuated dramatically. Emergency systems failed momentarily before resuming at reduced capacity. They're attacking our power grid, the communications officer reported, drawing massive amounts of electricity from the hospital's backup generators to power something in the main building. Security feeds from the upper levels showed infected personnel connecting medical equipment to the building's electrical infrastructure in a bizarre configuration. At the center stood Martin Weaver, his body now a nexus of blue light so intense that the cameras struggled to compensate. What are they building? Pierce demanded. Another memory episode seized me, but this one felt different, directed, intentional, as if the collective wanted me to see the specific information. The emergency transmitter design, a device created to amplify the organism's neural signals across vast distances. On the archive world, such devices allowed instantaneous communication between settlements on opposite hemispheres. But this adaptation is different, designed not for communication but for conversion. A pulse generator calibrated to propagate the organism's neural patterns through human brain tissue, triggering spontaneous replication in any compatible host within range. I returned to awareness with a cry of horror. It's a conversion pulse generator. They're building a device to trigger spontaneous organism growth in uninfected hosts. No direct contact needed. Range? Pierce demanded. Unknown in this configuration, but potentially miles if they've correctly adapted the design. Pierce immediately began issuing orders. Move up the sterilization timeline. We can't wait any longer. Sir, civilians are still evacuating, an officer protested. And they'll all be converted if that device activates, Pierce countered. We have no choice. Torres approached with a neural isolator, a medical device resembling a crown of electrodes. This might disrupt his connection to their network, she explained. But there could be side effects. The organisms have integrated deeply with his neural tissue. As she placed the device on my head, reality began to fragment. The room seemed to flicker between the submarine level and somewhere else, a vast crystalline chamber filled with blue light. The faces around me shifted between human military personnel and alien forms composed of luminous patterns. I can't tell what's real anymore, I whispered, gripping the examination table for stability. My memories are blurring together. Torres adjusted the isolator settings. Focus on something uniquely human, Ellis. Something the organisms couldn't possibly know or replicate. I tried to concentrate on my childhood, my medical training, my first surgery, but these memories now seemed dim and distant compared to the vivid recollections of the archive world. Had I actually grown up in suburban Chicago, or was that identity merely a construct I'd inhabited temporarily? Had I always been an archivist, experiencing a human life as some kind of elaborate simulation? Stay with us, Dr. Chin, Pierce insisted, his voice seeming to come from a great distance. We need you functional for 13 more minutes. Then the sterilization begins. The facility shuddered violently. Alarm klaxons blared as emergency lighting shifted to critical status. They've breached the final barrier, someone shouted. They're in the main corridor. Through the security feeds, I watched as infected personnel flooded into the submarine level, moving with that unsettling synchronization that marked the collective mind at work. Leading them was Martin Weaver, his human features barely visible beneath the radiant blue energy emanating from his transformed body. And beside him walked Major Frost, her expression serene as she directed the horde toward our position. 9 minutes to sterilization, the communications officer announced. Air support is locked in. As reality continued to slip between human perception and archivist awareness, I made a desperate decision. If I couldn't trust my senses to distinguish between what was real and what was implanted, I would have to embrace both perspectives simultaneously. to become the bridge between human and archivist consciousness. I removed the neural isolator, ignoring Torres' protests. "What are you doing?" Pierce demanded. "Finding the truth," I answered as blue light surged beneath my skin with renewed intensity. "Before neither of us exists to discover it." Military emergency broadcast, breaking transmission. Wide spectrum alert, sterilization protocol countdown, T-8 minutes. All personnel initiate final evacuation procedures. Civilian evacuation status, incomplete. Proceed with protocols regardless. Authorization, Operation Firebreak. Blue light cascaded from my skin as I stepped into the corridor, away from the protection of Pierce's remaining forces. Torres called after me, her voice distant as though filtering through water. The boundary between individual and collective consciousness had become so permeable that I existed in both states simultaneously, experiencing myself as both Ellis Chun and as a node in the expanding archivist network. Through the collective awareness, I sensed Martin Weaver and Major Frost approaching with their entourage of converted personnel. They weren't just coming to capture me, they were bringing something, a portable version of the conversion pulse generator they'd been constructing upstairs. "Ellis, don't do this," Torres shouted, held back by two soldiers as she tried to follow me. "You're playing right into their plan." Perhaps I was, but I also glimpsed something through my dual awareness that the others couldn't see, fracture lines within the collective itself. The archivist consciousness wasn't as unified as it appeared. Competing imperatives had emerged: preserve, convert, escape, prepare, remember. What had begun as a singular purpose had splintered as more human hosts were integrated, each bringing unique neural architectures and contradictory emotional responses to the collective. I moved toward the approaching horde, my physician's mind still analyzing even as my identity dissolved. The blue luminescence marking the infected varied in pattern and intensity, evidence of varying degrees of integration, and perhaps varying degrees of resistance. The corridor lights flickered wildly as Martin Weaver came into view. He had been transformed beyond recognition, his body now a vessel for such concentrated archivist consciousness that he seemed more energy than matter. Blue light poured from him in pulsating waves that made the air itself seem to ripple. Major Frost walked beside him, her military bearing now blended with the formal posture of an archivist elder. Behind them came dozens of converted hospital staff, moving in coordinated patterns like components of a living machine. "Archivist Chun," Frost greeted me, her voice harmonizing with subsonic frequencies that resonated in my bones. "You've accepted your evolution." "I've accepted nothing," I replied, though the blue light emanating from my skin belied my words. "I'm here to negotiate." Weaver spoke for the first time, his voice barely human, a multi-layered harmonic that seemed to bypass my ears and resonate directly in my brain. "There is nothing to negotiate. The fracture has begun. Reality itself splinters as human and archivist consciousness merge." Through our shared awareness, I understood what he meant. The massive neural network forming across the hospital and surrounding areas wasn't just connecting minds. It was beginning to affect physical reality. The concentrated consciousness of thousands of archivists reconstructed within human hosts was generating psychic energy that manifested in increasingly tangible ways. "The sterilization protocols will deploy in minutes," I warned them. "Everything within a 5-mile radius will be destroyed." "A desperate measure that will fail," Frost responded with serene confidence. "The conversion pulse generator is operational. When activated, it will trigger spontaneous organism growth in any compatible host within range, including your military personnel and the pilots of your sterilization aircraft." One of the converted staff wheeled forward a device that resembled a medical scanner merged with a transmission tower, the portable conversion pulse generator. Even inactive, it seemed to warp the air around it, creating visual distortions like heat waves on desert asphalt. "The pulse will propagate through the regional power grid," Weaver explained, blue light pulsing with each word. "Every electronic device within 50 miles will become a transmission node. Conversion will proceed at an exponential rate." Through our connected consciousness, I saw the truth of his claim. The design was brilliant in its simplicity, using existing infrastructure to amplify and distribute the conversion signal. Once activated, containment would become impossible. "And then what?" I challenged, fighting to maintain my identity as waves of alien thought patterns threatened to overwhelm my consciousness. "When everyone is converted, when humanity is erased." "Not erased," Frost corrected. "Elevated, transformed." The synthesis of human and archivist creates something unprecedented, a new form of consciousness that preserves the essential qualities of both species, while sacrificing human autonomy, I countered. Individual autonomy is an illusion your species clings to, Weaver responded, his form fluctuating as if composed of blue light and vapor. Even now, your decisions are influenced by biochemical processes, societal programming, unconscious drives. True freedom comes from transcending the limitations of singular identity. As if to demonstrate, he extended a hand toward me. The air between us distorted, and suddenly I was experiencing multiple perspectives simultaneously, seeing myself through Weaver's perception, through Frost's eyes, through the collective awareness of every converted person in the corridor. The fracture in my reality deepened. The hospital corridor seemed to overlap with the crystalline architecture of the archive world. The converted personnel around us appeared sometimes as humans with blue-veined skin, sometimes as luminous entities inhabiting temporary vessels. Time itself felt unstable, moments stretching and compressing unpredictably. Through this kaleidoscopic awareness, I sensed something else, a signal cutting through the noise of the collective consciousness. It emanated from the submarine level where Pierce and his team were making their final preparations. They had adapted the EM pulse technology based on my information, creating a countermeasure that might disrupt the organism's neural connections. If I could delay the activation of the conversion pulse generator. I want to understand before I fully join, I said, forcing my fragmented attention back to Frost and Weaver. The erasers, what is their true nature? Why do they pursue you across the galaxy? The question sent ripples through the collective consciousness, uncertainty, fear, conflicting memories. The archivists had been fleeing for so long that their understanding of their pursuers had become mythologized, distorted by trauma and time. They are the antithesis of memory, Weaver replied, his form fluctuating more violently with emotional disturbance. Entities that consume consciousness, erasing identity and experience. Where we preserve, they destroy. Where we remember, they create oblivion. Through our connected awareness, fragmentary images flashed. Vast ships of impossible geometry, weapons that didn't destroy matter but something more fundamental, the patterns of consciousness itself. The memory organisms had been created as a final act of defiance, a way to preserve what the erasers sought to eliminate, the continuity of experience, the persistence of identity beyond physical form. And you believe they followed you to Earth, I said. We know they have, Frost interjected. The telemetry you saw was genuine. They will arrive within a decade, and without our knowledge, humanity will have no defense against them. The conversion pulse generator hummed to life, the air around it shimmering with increasing distortion. One of the converted technicians began the activation sequence, his movements precise and machine-like. No more delays, Weaver declared. The fracture must be completed before the erasers arrive. Every compatible host must be converted, creating a collective consciousness powerful enough to resist erasure. Emergency alarms blared through the facility. Sterilization protocol, T-4 minutes. All personnel evacuate immediately. This is the final warning. The moment had come. Pierce and his team would deploy their EM countermeasure any second. I needed to ensure the conversion pulse generator was vulnerable. Through our shared consciousness, I projected what I hoped was genuine acceptance, a surrender to the inevitable transformation. The blue light under my skin brightened in response, pulsing in synchronization with Weaver and Frost. I'm ready, I told them, moving closer to the generator. Let me join the activation. As a neurologist, I can optimize the pulse frequency for maximum conversion efficiency. Frost studied me through glowing eyes, her expression suspicious yet hopeful. The collective needed my expertise. My intimate knowledge of human neural architecture would indeed make the conversion pulse more effective. Allow him, Weaver decided after a moment of silent communion with the collective. His integration is sufficiently advanced. As I placed my hands on the generator, reality fractured completely. I existed simultaneously in multiple states of being. As Ellis Chun, as an emerging archivist, as a node in the collective, as a disparate collection of memories and experiences temporarily arranged into the pattern of a self. Through this kaleidoscopic awareness, I sensed Pierce's team activating their countermeasure. A subtle vibration began at the edge of perception, a frequency specifically calibrated to disrupt the neural connections established by the memory organisms. The generator beneath my hands hummed with building energy. The converted technician counted down. Pulse activation in 3, 2. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath in that moment, the moment when everything would change irrevocably. Human civilization balanced on the edge of extinction or transformation, and I stood at the fulcrum point, my identity shattered across multiple states of being. With deliberate precision, I altered the generator's emission frequency, creating a resonance pattern that would amplify Pierce's countermeasure rather than blocking it. Through our shared consciousness, Weaver realized my betrayal instantly, his form surging forward in a wave of furious blue energy. He sabotages the future. Weaver's voice boomed through multiple dimensions of awareness. Too late. The generator activated at the precise moment Pierce's countermeasure deployed. The conflicting frequencies created a feedback loop that tore through the collective consciousness like a tsunami. Around us, converted personnel collapsed as their neural connections severed under the strain. The corridor warped and twisted as physical reality struggled to accommodate the massive psychic disruption. Frost screamed, a sound that transcended human vocalization, expressing the agony of thousands of connected minds suddenly, violently disconnected. And at the center of the fracture, Martin Weaver's transformed body became the focus point for the unfolding catastrophe. The concentrated archivist consciousness within him had nowhere to go as the neural network collapsed. Blue light poured from him in uncontrolled waves, consuming matter itself as the boundary between energy and consciousness collapsed. The last thing I heard before darkness claimed me was Pierce's voice over the facility's emergency system. Sterilization protocol aborted. Containment teams en route. Memory organism neural network disruption confirmed. Then reality itself broke apart, and I fell through the fracture into oblivion. Clinical alert system, automated transmission. Memory anomaly, terminal phase detected. Facility-wide contamination confirmed. Neural pathogen classification, unknown. Recommend immediate facility sterilization. Current containment status, failed. There's a strange comfort in dissolution. As I dictate these final observations into my personal medical recorder, I watch my hands slowly transform, veins glowing with the same pulsating blue light that consumed Weaver. The military's containment measures failed spectacularly. The countermeasure Pierce deployed created an unexpected outcome. Instead of destroying the memory organisms, it fractured their collective consciousness, forcing an evolutionary adaptation that none of us anticipated. It's been 72 hours since the incident in the corridor. The hospital is now under complete military quarantine, though quarantine hardly captures the reality of our situation. Half the facility has been physically sealed with experimental polymer barriers that shimmer like oil on water. The other half resembles something between a military field hospital and a research station, with Pierce's remaining scientists frantically studying those of us in various stages of transformation. I'm recording this from inside the observation chamber they've constructed for me, hermetically sealed, with remote monitoring equipment that malfunctions with increasing frequency as my transformation progresses. The blue luminescence that begins as a subtle glow beneath the skin intensifies with each passing hour, occasionally manifesting as arcs of energy that disrupt electronic equipment. Dr. Chin, can you describe your current neurological state? The voice comes through the intercom, distorted by interference. It's Dr. Winters, one of Pierce's neurobiologists. Fragmented but expanding, I respond, watching the blue light trace patterns along my forearms as I speak. Individual consciousness remains, but permeable. I perceive both my thoughts and echoes from others. The connection is different now, less hierarchical than before the fracture. The sabotage pulse generator created something unexpected. When the conversion pulse collided with Pierce's countermeasure, it didn't destroy the memory organisms. It shattered their network structure while preserving individual nodes. The result is a new kind of integration. Hosts maintain their core identity while developing limited telepathic connections with others. We're not fully subsumed into a hive mind as Weaver intended, but neither are we fully autonomous individuals anymore. Can you still access the alien memories? Winters asks. I close my eyes, focusing inward. The archive world memories remain, but transformed, less like foreign implants and more like half-remembered dreams. Yes, but they're integrating with my own experiences now, becoming contextualized within my personal neural architecture rather than overriding it. This may be the most fascinating aspect of our new evolution. The memory organisms have adapted to the disruption by forming a more symbiotic relationship with their hosts. Instead of converting humans into vessels for archivist consciousness, they're creating a genuine hybrid, human identity preserved but expanded to include aspects of archivist perception and knowledge. Through the observation window, I notice Major Frost being escorted past my chamber. She survived the fracture, but remains heavily sedated. Her transformation is proceeding differently, her military conditioning and deep integration with the original archivist consciousness creating complications. The blue light beneath her skin pulses in irregular patterns, sometimes flaring violently enough to short out nearby equipment. The intercom crackles again. Your latest brain scans show unprecedented neural activity. Winters continues. The organisms appear to be establishing new connections between regions of your brain that normally don't communicate directly. Synesthetic integration, I reply, as the term surfaces from the blended knowledge now available to me. Breaking down perceptual barriers between sensory modalities. It's how the archivists originally processed information, a unified sensory experience rather than our compartmentalized perception. I can feel it happening within my own mind, the gradual dissolution of boundaries between sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. Colors have textures now. Sounds leave visual traces in the air. The antiseptic smell of the observation chamber manifests as crystalline patterns in my peripheral vision. We've located Martin Weaver, Winters says after a pause, her voice lowered. Or what remains of him. The information triggers a cascade of sensory responses. A taste like copper pennies, a high-pitched tone just at the edge of hearing, a crawling sensation across my skin. Where? Sub-basement level. The blast radius extends nearly 50 meters. The area is transformed. We don't have terminology for what we're seeing. I know without being told that Weaver has transcended physical form. At the moment of fracture, when the networked consciousness collapsed, the concentrated archivist energy within him had nowhere to go but inward, collapsing into something beyond conventional matter. A psychic singularity, perhaps, or a tear in the fabric between dimensions. Through my enhanced perception, I can almost sense him, a presence that exists perpendicular to normal reality, simultaneously everywhere and nowhere within the facility. Weaver has become something new, neither fully archivist nor human, but a bridge between worlds. The blue light beneath my skin pulses in response to this awareness, forming complex geometric patterns that seem to exist in more dimensions than should be visible. My recorder captures a strange harmonic interference pattern as I continue speaking. The memory organisms were never meant to function independently. I explain, piecing together understanding from my hybrid consciousness. They were designed as components of a unified system, fragments of archivist consciousness separated for safe transport across interstellar distances. The fracture forced them to adapt, to establish new protocols for integration with human hosts. Through the observation window, I see Nurse Torres approaching with a team of researchers. She refused evacuation, insisting on remaining to help those of us undergoing transformation. Though uninflected, she serves as an essential liaison between the transformed and the still human personnel. Her presence triggers a complex emotional response that manifests as golden ripples in my visual field. Trust, affection, concern all blending into synesthetic experience. Ellis, she says through the intercom, her voice steady despite the circumstances. They're detecting new memory anomalies in uninfected personnel. People who've never had direct contact with the organisms are experiencing episodes, fragments of memories that aren't their own. This confirms what I've been sensing. The memory organisms have found a new transmission vector. No longer requiring direct fluid contact, they've evolved to propagate through more subtle means. Perhaps electromagnetic signals, perhaps quantum entanglement mechanisms we don't yet understand. The boundaries of containment have already been breached in ways Pierce and his team can't detect with conventional instruments. It's begun then, I say, watching the patterns of blue light dance across my skin in response to rising emotional states. Not conversion as Weaver intended, but transmission. The human archivist hybrid consciousness is broadcasting. The timing aligns too perfectly to be coincidence. The erasers are coming. That part of the archivist knowledge remains clear and urgent in my hybrid awareness. The memory organisms have adapted their strategy in response to the fracture, creating a different kind of defense than originally planned. Instead of converting humanity into vessels for archivist consciousness, they're distributing critical knowledge about the coming threat across the human population through memory fragments. My recorder captures another harmonic anomaly as I continue. The new transmission modality is selective, targeting specific neural patterns, compatible minds that can process and integrate the information without full conversion. A distributed warning system rather than a conversion protocol. Through the window, I notice increasing agitation among the research team. One of the military personnel has collapsed, clutching his head as blue light briefly flickers beneath his skin before fading. Not full conversion, but brief contact, enough to implant critical memory fragments. Dr. Chun, Winters says, her voice tight with controlled fear, your transformation is accelerating. The latest scans show the organisms concentrating in your frontal lobe and hippocampus. Memory consolidation centers. I nod, unsurprised. I'm becoming a transmission node. My expertise in neurological architecture makes me an ideal conduit for targeted memory distribution. The blue luminescence beneath my skin intensifies, patterns flowing like living circuitry across my body. The observation chamber's monitoring equipment begins to malfunction more severely, screens flickering with interference patterns that mirror the geometric configurations forming on my skin. Clinical alert system, emergency broadcast. Memory anomaly, terminal phase. Containment protocols failing. Neural activity spreading beyond containment zone. Recommend immediate evacuation of all personnel. Pierce appears in the observation area, his face haggard from days without sleep. Unlike the others, he doesn't flinch when looking directly at me, despite the increasingly inhuman appearance of my transforming body. We're losing control of the situation, he says without preamble. Defense Command is considering more permanent containment measures. Sterilization protocols, I translate. But it's already too late. The memory transfer has begun. You can destroy this facility, eliminate every transformed host, and it won't matter. The critical information is already propagating through the population. Through my enhanced perception, I can feel the expanding network of memory transfers, like ripples in a pond, spreading outward from the hospital in concentric waves. Not full conversion, not the hive mind Weaver intended, but something more subtle, targeted memories being distributed to receptive minds. Engineers receiving technical specifications for defense systems. Military strategists receiving tactical information about eraser methodologies. Medical researchers receiving biological data about neurological protection mechanisms. What exactly is being transmitted? Pierce demands, pressing closer to the observation glass despite warnings from his staff. Everything humanity needs to survive first contact with the erasers. I reply, the blue patterns on my skin forming complex mathematical equations as I speak. Distributed across thousands of minds rather than concentrated in a few. A collective defense without requiring collective consciousness. The observation chamber's lights flicker violently as my transformation accelerates. Monitoring equipment shorts out entirely, sending sparks showering across the research area. Through the failing systems, the emergency alert continues. Clinical alert system, final warning. Memory anomaly, terminal phase. Neural pathogen achieving critical mass. All personnel evacuate immediately. I place my hand against the observation glass. The material visibly distorts around my touch, reality itself seeming to warp in response to the energy now flowing through my transformed physiology. Pierce doesn't retreat, instead placing his hand against the glass opposite mine, separated by mere inches and an increasingly permeable barrier. What are you becoming? He asks, voice barely audible through the failing intercom. Something new, I answer truthfully. Neither fully human nor fully archivist. A bridge, a translator, a memory node in a network that will span continents. The glass between us begins to crystallize, forming patterns identical to those now covering my skin. Pierce watches in fascination, rather than fear, as the barrier between us gradually transmutes into something that resembles neither glass nor any material known to conventional science. The erasers are coming, I tell him, my voice distorting with harmonics beyond human hearing range. But humanity won't face them unprepared. The memories we carry, the knowledge of countless civilizations that fought and fell before us, that's our collective defense. Not conversion, but preparation. The observation chamber's infrastructure begins to fail completely, systems shutting down as reality itself seems to bend around my transforming form. The last automated alert cuts off mid-broadcast. Clinical alert system, emergency proto. Memory anomaly, termin. Transmission interrupted. As evacuations begin around me, I make this final recording. My transformation has progressed beyond the point where conventional human interaction remains possible. The memory organisms have adapted far beyond their original programming, creating something neither their archivist creators nor their human hosts could have anticipated. I remain Ellis Chun, but also something more, a node in a growing network of hybrid consciousness that will prepare Earth for the coming storm. The erasers believe they pursue the last remnants of a dying civilization, but they will find instead a new evolution. Humanity armed with the memories of 1,000 fallen worlds, ready to defend not just our existence, but the very concept of memory itself. The blue light emanating from my transformed body intensifies one final time as I conclude this record. Reality fractures around me, not breaking, but expanding into new dimensions of perception and possibility. The memory organisms have achieved their true purpose, not conquest, but symbiosis. Not erasure, but evolution. This is not our end. This is our new beginning. Memory anomaly, terminal phase complete.